This is Diana Lindsay from Sunbelt Publications, and welcome to another Sunbelt Spotlight. Very, very excited about this book. This book is probably the most beautiful book we have ever put together. And just kind of giving you a quick look here. It's magnificent. It's over 304 pages. Just absolutely beautiful, stunning book. And we're excited today to have folks to talk about it. The book will be in the warehouse probably by next week. And for those of you that are watching and are interested in this book after you hear this talk, and maybe go to our website, our Facebook page, and you can view the sneak peek that we had a couple of weeks ago. If you are interested in this book, we have a pre-publication special of 20% off. So you can take advantage of that, and it's on all editions of the book. We have a soft cover book that retails for $49.95. We have a hardcover at $99.95, and then the super deluxe book that is in a clamshell box, a cloth bound box, absolutely beautiful, with special things that are done to the book, and that retails for $299.95. So if interested, take advantage of that. I'd like to start out as introducing one of the authors of the book. His name is Eugene Meieran. Wayne Thompson is the other author, and Jeannie's going to be telling you about him shortly. This is just a book that's been in production for over 5 years with us and much longer with Jean and Wayne. It's a book that has been lovingly put together by these two men. Gene is very interesting background. He graduated from MIT Material Science, is a professional engineer. He actually even helped on the Apollo 12, and he has been a collector of ceramics and also for minerals. And that's how he met Wayne. And he'll be telling you more about that. And then because of Wayne's interest in collecting baskets, he got involved with this book and has been just a key person in helping to put these books together, the photographs and everything. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gene. Gene, please take it away.
Well, hello, everybody, and it's certainly a pleasure to be in on this podcast or Zoomcast or whatever you want to call it and talk about the book. Just a few words of introduction. I've been a collector of crystals and mineral specimens for over 75 years. And through my interest, I used to go to the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show, and there I met Wayne Thompson, who was also a collector of very, very fine mineral specimens. And in fact, he had personally dug up out of the ground many of the wonderful specimens that are in museums throughout the world. He then wrote a book about these wonderful mineral specimens he called Ikons, Icons of Mineralogy, these great specimens that populate the collectors and the museums throughout the world. And his wife, Laura, became sick. And while she was sick in the hospital, Wayne turned his attention over to looking at basketry. It turns out my wife was a ceramic artist, and Wayne's wife, Laura, was also interested in ceramics, particularly for the Pueblo Indian reservations of Arizona and New Mexico. So we became quite close with our common interest in minerals and in the ceramic pottery. When Wayne turned to look at Indian basketry, I decided to help him since he did not know much about computer technology, and I, as having worked at Intel for many years, knew a lot about computer technology and therefore could hunt down the images, the museums, the collectors, the dealers through the internet and other means. So we then put this book together, which started about 10 years ago. During the time when we tried to do this, we became sort of experts in basket making, but Wayne in particular became a very, very great expert on the history of the baskets and of the weavers, particularly from the Central California area, Southern California, a little bit of Northern California, the place, time period from about 1895 roughly to 1940, a term called the Florescence. during which probably the best baskets in the history of the world were produced by the Indians of those regions. So we put together this book that was sort of a parallel of Wayne's book on mineralogy, Icons of Mineralogy. And this is one of California Indian Basketry, Icons of the Florescence, the term used to denote this particular time period. In order to put the book together, we needed somebody to help edit it because we were not experts in the anthropology or the ethnology or the anthropology of the Indian area. So we called upon Alan. Alan, who is on this broadcast, may say a few words, was an expert in Indian rock art, a PhD in anthropology, and he helped put the book together for us, making sure that we were correct in our terminology, the identification of locations and so forth. But as important, or perhaps more important, I want to show you one screenshot of my computer. So I'm taking the phone with my images and I'm going to turn it to this thing. And you can see on the left, a bunch of the people, all the peoples that we used to get baskets. This is a list of the sources of basketry. And each one of them, for example, here's Agua Caliente as one of the sources. And if I can find that on here, Agua Caliente or Autry Museum, you can see that there's a list of people that goes on and on. And in fact, if we were to use all the sources we have in the book, it would be the 340 pages that were described. The book would be 40,000 pages because I have over 20,000 emails. I have copies of images of perhaps 15,000 images that went together to the book. Now, one of the people that particularly helped in the book is one that is an expert in both in having baskets as a collector, also having a lot of the vintage photographs of the weavers of the baskets from the 1900 to 1940 time period, as well as having a lot of the historical data about the weavers and the baskets and the tribes from which these baskets originated, and that is Alex Schwed. So Alex has agreed to be onto this particular broadcast, and in fact, right now I will turn it over to Alex, and he will talk about the basketry. So first introduce Alex, and then I will ask him some questions about how he got started and is interested in basketry.
Thank you very much, Gene. Go ahead with the first question.
All right, question number one. As a collector of fine native Indian baskets, why? Why did you begin collecting?
Well, I was always interested in the history of California. I collected California Gold Rush and Clipper Ship cards. Baskets are a part of California history. Coiling in California has been around for over 8,500 years. We're talking about the same history of the area and time period, just different people. Collecting baskets allowed me to study California Native American Indians, their history, culture, and art. They opened up a whole new world to me. The first time I saw an Indian basket was at the Crocker Art Gallery in 1995. There was a huge diagonally twined pomo there, 30 inches in diameter. It was collected in 1841 by Captain William Dane Phelps, master of the ship Alert. The author Richard H. Dana served on this ship, where he wrote his famous book 2 years before the mast. Phelps sailed from Boston to California, taking part in the hide and tallow trade, as well as the otter fur trade. He received this basket from John Augustus Sutter as a gift. The other basket that was there was a 27-inch basket woven by Carrie Bethel. It was 27 inches wide and 14 inches high. It came out of a private collection. It was woven by Bethel when she worked in the laundry at the Tioga Lodge at Mono Lake. She was born in Lee Vining. She was an accomplished weaver and a prominent competitor in the Yosemite and June Lake Indian Field Days in the 1920s. Patron James Schwabacher bought most of her larger baskets. By the 1930s, she was weaving primarily beaded baskets. She died in 1974 and is buried in Lee Vining.
It turns out, of course, that the time frame of the Florescence from about 1895 coincided with the railroad coming in, tourism growing up, and other materials becoming available to the Indians, so that they changed from making baskets for utilitarian use to making baskets for tourist trade, but still maintaining a lot of their tribal identities and symbolisms and ideologies. For you, what is it about the native California Indian baskets that you in particular found most engaging?
Well, baskets are not only beautiful, but they're tactile. I love the way that they're put together. Baskets are like a fingerprint. Each one is different. For me, the search for a basket is like a scene out of an Indiana Jones movie. I'm searching through leads and going back, piecing together the historical record, correcting misinformation, and locating collections. I have also determined that basket characteristics, the shape, the design, and its fineness determine price. I really get a kick out of finding a basket that other people have missed. A couple of years ago, a friend and I drove up to Klamath, California, onto the reservation. There was an antique store that hadn't been open for 25, 30 years. I knew before I set foot in there that it would have been heavily picked through by other dealers and collectors. But looking around, I still found something good there. I found a nice lattice twine bowl that was woven by the owner's mother, and I got an eel trap that he found on the Klamath River. Both of them I picked up pretty cheap. Okay, next question.
Well, the next question is run from my technological background. I worked at Intel, of course, and we made microchips where the features would get finer and finer and finer, you know, well below the width of a human hair, and doing all kinds of neat things. And part of my interest in the basketry is from the fact that the technology where the people could take these pieces of grass, of reeds, of other kinds of materials, and put them together with their hands and make these incredibly sophisticated and technologically marvelous baskets of ever larger size, up to 4, 5, 6 feet in diameter, as well as small size, 1/4 of an inch in diameter, using the same technique. So my question to you is, what types of baskets do you find the most important, engaging, or aesthetically beautiful, or the most technologically sophisticated?
Well, Gene, that would be bowls, bottlenecks, and trays. Collectors have developed a grading system. Number 1, overall visual impact. Is the basket beautiful? Is it striking? Was the weaver talented and experienced? Number 2, degree of adherence to traditional form and design. Did she make the basket the same way as her mother and grandmother? The technique has to be the same, and the materials have to be the same. Number 3, quality and type of materials and how well prepared. People have to understand that it usually takes more time to gather and process the materials than it does to weave the basket. It's difficult for weavers to access ancient gathering sites because the land may be privately owned and fenced off. Weavers often complain about the pesticides Caltrans uses because they kill off native plants that they're looking for. Older weavers have a difficult time accessing gathering sites too. They need to be driven by someone. They need permission to enter these sites. Some of these materials have to be tended. Sedge, for example. The weavers will go out every year, dig up the roots, the rhizomes, prune them, and bury them again. This happens again a year later. Perhaps they'll harvest the material on the third year. Number 4, degree of mastery of technique exhibited. How good of a weaver was she? Is she an experienced weaver? Number 5, condition, whether or not the basket is damaged. Provenance, through whose hands did it pass? Who wove it? Number 7, intended use. A large fine Yokot's gambling tray is more valuable than a large fine Yokot's cooking bowl. Rarity. How many of a particular type of basket is still around? Number 9, age. When was it made? Is it a cave basket? Was it made in the 1890s? Was it made in the 1920s? Or even in the 1960s? Excellent baskets were produced in the 1960s. Finally, size. Just remember that just because a basket is bigger does not mean that it's better. Go ahead with the next question.
Well, notice when you talk about these things, you use the word she quite often. As it turns out that almost all the weavers were female. In our book, they are all female with the exception of one picture by William Benson, who is the husband of Mary Benson of Pumo. He's one that actually made this little tiny basket that's about 1/4 of an inch in diameter, a true technological marvel as far as I'm concerned. So of the weavers, as again, they are basically female, which weavers did you study and whose baskets are represented in the book that are perhaps of most interest to you?
Well, first of all, men did weave, but mostly they wove utilitarian baskets, things that they used for fishing, gathering fruits, nuts, that sort of thing. But some of my favorite weavers are Mrs. Dick Francisco, who most people consider Yokots, but she's technically Bancalachi. She's a Tubat. Lucy Tellis, she was Mona Lake Paiute. Louisa Kaiser, she was Washoe. Selena Jackson, she was Maidu. And one of my favorites, none of these weavers are in order. One of my favorites, Mary Weldon. She was Kawayasu from Kelso Valley and the Onyx area. Go ahead with the next question.
Well, it turns out that in a later talk, we're going to have the great-granddaughter of Lucy Tellis will be presenting for Sunbelt sometime in the beginning of January, I believe. Wayne and I, when we put together the book, as I said, Wayne was always interested in masterpiece, top of the quality, top of the line mineral specimens. They had to be the best of the best. And when he started looking at the basketry things 10 years ago, he again only wanted to look at the best of the best, and that's why he settled on this particular area and this particular time frame. But to you, who was not Wayne, why are the California native baskets considered by you to be some of the most sophisticated as well as most beautiful in the world?
Well, because of the exposure that they've received in museum exhibitions around the world, because of the way that they are made, because of the technique used to weave them, because of the manner and types of material used to make them, because the tradition of making baskets has been unbroken in California for over 8,500 years. California does not have a tradition of making pottery. Go ahead.
No, that's interesting. I mean, I would agree with you because when Wayne and I got together in the pottery stuff, it was all about the Pueblo tribes of Arizona and New Mexico who are famous, the Nampeyo, the Marias and so forth of the area that made the pottery of the Pueblos as famous. And of course, the people that you just talked about made the basketry of the California region famous. In our book, we have about 450 color images of baskets. We have about 250 black and white vintage photographs taken during the time frame 1900 to 1940. Many of the images show the weavers holding the very baskets that we have the color pictures of. So we have a number of baskets, and obviously we're not going to go through all 450 in the time frame that's remaining. So which baskets appearing in the Ikons book? We call it the Ikons with a K, because that's the way Wayne titled his book on minerals, Icons of Mineralogy with a K, just a peculiarity that he had. Which baskets appearing in the Ikons books has the most remarkable history and engaging stories surrounding the weaver, the origin of the baskets, or their associations?
You know, we mentioned that California Indians didn't really have a tradition of making pottery. This was because they moved around a lot. They moved between their summer grounds and their winter grounds, and dragging pots around for maybe hundreds of miles would be a problem. They'd probably break. Baskets were more pliable, flexible, and they were able to withstand the abuse.
And lighter.
So, thank you. So the baskets, which are most remarkable, are those that we know something about. Most baskets have no provenance. The weavers are unknown. Louisa Kaiser, also known as Datsolali, was one of the most famous weavers. Abe Cohn meticulously recorded the baskets Louisa wove in his basket inventory. The Caliente Creek drainage was important also. This is an area that's overlooked. Native people were located there from surrounding areas and from Fort Tejon by the cavalry. This was done so the military could keep an eye on them. There were Chumash, Southern Yokots, Tubats, Kauai Sioux, Paiute, and Chemehuevi, all living and weaving together. Ida Ichow is another weaver we know something about. She made herself accessible to many people, including Frank Latta, who wrote extensively about the Yokots tribe in Central California. Ichow also often gave weaving demonstrations to kids at the Kern County Museum. She was born in Squaw Valley. She was an important weaver from an important family. Her mother was Mary Tupino, also known as Mrs. Britches, and her grandmother was Lizzie Chapo. Minnie Hancock is another weaver that's overlooked by a lot of people. She was Yokots. She was Wauchumni Yokots, born in 1892. She may have lived in the Squaw Valley Dunlap area or near Farmersville. I'm really not sure. Stitch counts of 50 per inch and coil counts of 20 per inch were not unusual for her. Her material was flawless. This is why she's considered one of the best weavers in the South Central Valley of California. Now I'd like to talk about my baskets a little bit. This is a Minnie Hancock creation basket. It's 30 stitches per inch, 15 coils per inch. The first scene shows man rising out of the primordial mud. He's endowed with animals to eat and weapons to hunt with. Then comes the coming of white man. We see the transit, which symbolizes a railroad, a pitchfork, which symbolizes agriculture, an animal pelt, which symbolizes fur, and a dog, which was a pet, I guess, I'm not sure. So man continued to live, hunting. He was given fire by the Creator, and he was also giving housing, a teepee. So finally, man coexists with nature. So that's one of my more favorite baskets. Let's see slide 1. Okay, so this is a basket that she won an award for in 1924. Let's see the picture of Lucy Tellis and her large basket. That's the next slide. There, this one right here. 1930, she was considered the best basket maker in the area. She finished her large basket in 1933. It was 20 inches high and 31 inches wide. It took her 4 years to weave. This doesn't include gathering materials. She became the primary demonstrator at Indian Village in 1947, where she continued to sell baskets to visitors. Later in life, she made beaded baskets. She also made single rods, 3 rods. She died in 1955. Now let's show the Datsolali basket.
Well,
Next slide.
one comment here is that basket is on display, has been on display at the Yosemite Village Museum in Yosemite National Park.
Correct, and it's very impressive. Okay, this basket is a dejikup. It was woven by Louisa Kaiser, also known as Datsolali. It's a dejikup. It was woven in 1902. It's 9 3/4 inches high and 13 1/2 inches in diameter. It's made out of willow, redbud, and dyed bracken fern root. It's 27 stitches per inch and 6 coils per inch. One of the things that I like to look at is a basket's coil count. A stitch count may be impressive, but if the coil count isn't, that means she could have gotten the basket done in half the time that it would take someone with a basket with higher coil count. The inventory number of this basket is LK30. It was owned by Abe Cohn's lawyer. Cohn took this basket in partial payment for settling Abe Cohn's estate. Louisa was born in Washoe Territory near the California-Nevada border in 1850. She originally washed clothes for the Abe Cohn family, who was the owner of the Emporium Company clothing store. With Cohn's encouragement, she began weaving a style of basket that by 1897 developed into the dejikup. All of her baskets are meticulously inventoried in the ledger. Why don't we show the next slide? Abe Cohn's efforts promoted her work to the level and price of fine art. She died in Carson City in 1905. Next slide. This is a friendship gambling tray commemorating the 1890 Ghost Dance, woven by Louisa Francisco, also known as Mrs. Dick Francisco. The diameter is 31 inches. The basket has 62 ghost dancers holding hands in a friendship dance. They're old style stick figures. It came from the collection of Alice Henderson, a longtime resident of Springfield, California. Mrs. Dick Francisco was born in Glenville in 1857 and lived most of her life on the Tule River Reservation. She wove over 20 great trays that were over 30 inches in diameter. She served as an informant to Frank Latta, and her husband served as an informant to the anthropologist A.H. Gayton. She was one of the best weavers in the area. Most of her baskets were collected by a group of San Francisco and local investors who started the Pioneer Bank of Porterville. They later opened up a branch in Springfield. They included Wilco Mentz, Harry Cummings Carr, Fred W. Veely, and William Farahan Harvey. Later, Louisa, in her old age, moved back to Porterville, where she was taken care of by Lyda Perrone. She died in 1954. She cleaned houses for a living. You know, it just goes to show you that they made more money cleaning houses than they did weaving their great baskets. Next slide. This is a bottleneck that's been woven by Mrs. Dick Francisco. It's 7 inches high and 14 inches in diameter. Mrs. Dick wove well over 30 great bottlenecks measuring over 12 inches in diameter. She was a very prolific weaver. The materials that she used in her baskets were phenomenal, and she gathered them herself on the Tule River Reservation.
Before you go ahead, let me put in a comment, okay?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you notice this picture on the left that shows Mrs. Dick Francisco holding the two baskets, one of which is shown in the picture. And this is part of the research that we did, is to find the basket and find the picture of the weaver holding the basket, which we did for, I think, about 70 different images, where we have the vintage picture taken well over 100, 110, 120 years ago, and the basket where it exists today, and tried to match the basket and the person in the picture holding that particular basket. This is a beautiful example where we actually have both those baskets in the book that Mrs. Dick Francisco was holding well over 100 years ago.
You know, you guys did a phenomenal job putting the photographs and the weavers together. It's very difficult to do, and it's tough to tell often from old pictures what is what. And you guys just really did a good job. Lots of information in the book, a lot of things that I never knew. Okay, so last slide, please. This is a dejecoupe that was woven by Selena Jackson. It's 8.5 inches high, and the diameter is 17 inches. This basket was not woven in the 1920s. It was woven in the 1890s. It's from the Katie collection. It's pictured in the 1905 Katie photo on the middle of the top shelf of the rightmost bookcase. The design is flocks of geese. It's made out of maple, red bud, and dyed split bracken fern root. Selena was born at Oak Grove in Genesee Valley, Plumas County, in 1874. Her sister was Ina Jackson, also an accomplished weaver. Her mother was Northeastern Maidu, and her father was Welsh, a white man. She was one of the finest Maidu weavers. I'm ready for the group's questions.
Come on. I was going to ask him about Alan is an expert in understanding the symbolism on the various baskets, and he can trace from one tribe to the other some of the intermingling of the tribes and the influence of one particular weaver from one tribe on the designs of another weaver from another tribe. So I was just going to ask him a question about that, but he's not able to be on these voices.
Well, you know, one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have is, you know, the designs have a, you know, deep hidden meaning. Jerry Collins dealt with this in the Arizona Highways issue, July 1975. One design meant one thing to one weaver, and the same design may mean something else to another weaver from another tribe. Just because you see a particular design on a basket does not mean that it's particular to a tribe. The way to distinguish one basket from another basket in terms of what tribe it's from is by the materials and the shape. This is something else that's overlooked a lot.
Okay, Diana, back to you.
Sure, I'm looking at the chat right now. I thought it was really interesting that we have somebody from the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom. So that's really wonderful. I'm looking for more questions that people might have, but I have one myself. Since there are collectors of these baskets, how much are these things worth? And you know, what kind of value do they have on them? What do collectors actually pay for some of these best baskets?
Well, some of the good baskets have gone for over $1 million, the Dotsolali baskets. The ones that went for the most money, looking through the inventory log, were baskets that took over a year to make. So you're talking about something that's at least 13 inches in diameter and something that's, you know, intricate. Remember, this book only deals with coiled basketry. It does not deal with twine basketry, and that's half of the basket production in California. So that's something people should look into also. I wanted to show you another basket. This is a basket that was woven by Tima Link. Some of you may know her. She came out here once for the Meieran show, and she spent the entire time with John Bradley, another weaver, looking for juncus and weaving this basket. So thank you, Tima Link.
So the question, next question.
I can answer.
Oh,
let
yeah, the
me
next
ask,
question. Oh, sorry, Gene. Go ahead.
yeah, I can answer a little bit more on that. The value of baskets, you know, obviously it fluctuates with the market in terms of what people have for money that they can spend on collectibles and economic times and so forth and so on. But the baskets, like the pottery, I can also mention the pottery, Maria Martinez pottery. When she was first making it, she was selling it on the roadside for $5 or $10 a pot. And now the pots are, some of them are in the $400,000 or $500,000 range for what was then a $5 piece of pottery. It's because all of a sudden things get floated into the art market, and just the same way that Van Gogh, when he was doing paintings, could not sell them, but now his paintings sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. So it really depends on the value of the person that is appreciating that particular art form. So in the terms of the basketry, it goes all the way from the high end in the $2 million, $3 million down to the things that you could buy at auction today of some of the basketry that are in the few $1,000s range for very nice baskets, a whole range of prices.
And then the question is, how much were they paid for some of these magnificent baskets? I know, adjusting for the today's value, what do you think they made? An expert basket weaver, what would she have made on a basket that may have taken her a year or 2 years to make?
Well, you know, first of all, people balked at the prices of these baskets back then. They didn't realize how long it took to weave and to gather the materials. So I think they did pretty well, especially during the Great Depression. Lucy Tellis supported her whole family. She supported her kids' kids, and, you know, grandkids from another part of the family. So a lot of people depended on this woman. You know, she worked very hard. She and Carrie Bethel just churned material out. And, you know, they wove things that people could afford to buy and things that people thought were beautiful. You know, I saw, as the questions were rolling up, somebody asked if California Indians made utilitarian baskets. Of course they did. This is what they used to cook with. Everything that you see behind me is utilitarian. This is a pomo seed beater. Let me see if you can see that. It's old. It's probably 1870s, 1890s, and everything was made a particular way to help them do their work.
Did they decorate their utilitarian baskets and spend as much time doing that?
Not as much time, but certainly they were decorated. If you can see this winnowing tray behind me, it has decoration on the bottom. And they also use the technique of their weaving as decoration. But in general, the coiled basketry, well, you can't even just say that the coiled basketry was more heavily decorated. You know, pomos made diagonally twined burden baskets, which had phenomenal designs on them. lot of these designs were put on baskets to show off their skill when they'd have basically ceremonies, dance ceremonies, when they gathered with other tribes. Everybody brought their best wares out, their largest, finest baskets to cook in and to show the skill, you know, that these women had.
Jim asked the question, would baskets be woven one at a time, or were multiple baskets be worked on simultaneously?
Both, you know, basically to answer that question, you know, a lot of the weavers would, you know, Lucy Tellis was working on, I don't know how many she worked at one time, maybe 20 baskets at a time. And they'd start something out and, you know, maybe they didn't have the design quite worked out. Remember, you know, coiling is likened to sewing. You know, you're moving around the outside of the basket. The coils are not level, you know, so everything that you do has to match up with everything as you're working your way up the side of the basket. Basically, you had to have the whole basket worked out in your head before you ever started weaving. So it really takes a lot of skill to do something complex. A lot of people, you know, there's a competition. Some people think that, you know, Lucy Tellis was a better weaver or that Carrie Bethel was a better weaver. You know, to me, Lucy Tellis's baskets have more life to them. Maybe Carrie Bethel's are technically superior, but to me, I really enjoy baskets woven by Lucy Tellis.
Let me add on to that one little comment, is that Carrie Bethel had a sister, Minnie Mike.
Right.
And Minnie Mike is, a lot of experts believe that Minnie Mike was a better weaver than Carrie Bethel. But Carrie Bethel was weaving in order to bring an income in, so she wove a lot of wonderful baskets. Minnie Mike apparently was a little bit wealthier and she did not have to weave as much. Even though she might have been a better weaver, she is less well known than her sister Carrie Bethel.
You know, the basket, the Carrie Bethel's basket at the Crocker Art Gallery, the 27-inch one that's owned by a private collector, is just a phenomenal basket. You know, you asked earlier, what's something like that worth? You know, what I heard through the grapevine was that the collector was offered $6 million for it and he turned it down.
Wow.
So I don't know what that means exactly, but boy, that sure sounds like a lot of money.
So we have a question from George. Do you have any Holy Grail stories, baskets that we have historic record of, but are currently lost, missing, and are still much sought?
Let me start off the answer to that with one very famous story by a weaver, a Washoe weaver named Sarah Mayo. Sarah wove a basket in about 1918 or something like that.
Oh, that's a good story. Yeah.
That was donated. It was woven for the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, and it was taken by one of her relatives to Woodrow Wilson and presented to the government of the United States. And it's called the presidential basket. We don't have a picture of the basket itself in our book, but we have a picture of her holding the presidential basket with some images of that basket. And that basket has been lost to history. And there's actually stories about the presidential basket and nobody knows its whereabouts.
Well, that's a great story.
And
it's probably hidden in the Smithsonian somewhere.
Ty wants to know, were pine needles used in California weaving? What other materials were used?
Well, I'm not sure how long pine needles have been used. I don't think they were used in the olden times. So the materials that we use in California are sedge, dyed bracken fern root, peeled and unpeeled redbud. let's see, in Kwaisu used, willow. They used rod foundation. They used yucca for red, and they used bulrush and devil's claw for black. The Mission Indians used dyed and untied juncus and also sumac, which is really a striking material when it's combined with juncus. There's a lot to this. Juncus variegates, its way up the stem. So you have to use a particular part of the stem, a particular part of the grass, just to make sure all your materials match up. Eventually they're going to be able to figure out, maybe through DNA or whatever, where these baskets exactly came from. Which river did they come off of? And that's going to be really interesting.
Ty had another question too. He wanted to know if you wanted to start becoming a collector, where would you recommend we start to become a collector? And then of course he says, purchase the book. And I say, absolutely, purchase the book and learn. And other comments.
The more you learn before you start collecting, the better shape that you're going to be in. Because, you may end up spending a lot of money quickly. And the worst thing that you can do is pay 15 grand for a basket that's only worth 3, or a basket that you think is wonderful that's been repaired or alterated. So, I bought my first baskets from dealers, and dealers are a good place to start. People say, oh, the dealers are too expensive. But, here's what I found, that at auction, the prices get pretty expensive too. You want to be able to buy a basket from a collector or from a dealer at your leisure and not face the pressure of an auction. At my first auction, I did pretty well. I bought a little Maidu, I think for $1,200. Everything, as we were getting up to that basket, things were going below estimate. I thought, oh, I'm going to be getting a great deal on this. And as soon as my basket popped up, everybody wanted it. So it's not like I got a great price on it. At most, you'll get something good. But the best baskets are sold between collectors and between dealers and collectors. So finding a good, honest dealer, of which there are many, is really a great place to start. And literally, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can buy yourself a respectable coiled basket for $200 or $300, something small, maybe, but still something that I'd be proud to own. So you have to study, basically. It's like the stock market, for God's sakes.
Okay. Sorry. One final question from Jim. If a weaver made a mistake, was it undone and corrected?
Depends. Lucy Tellis and Carrie Bethel, boy, they were churning this stuff out during the field days. And, if they made mistakes, they just kind of kept on going. And sometimes weavers, usually you hear these stories about, let's say a daughter, complaining to her mother that her basket isn't going well. And of course, the mother comes by and tears out, half the work that she's done, and she has to start over again. And the other thing is the little girls, the apprentices are trying to mooch materials off of their mothers, and their mothers won't give them up. They give them little scraps. So basically, they want them to go out and find the material themselves. Most weavers gathered their own material, but some didn't. Some were too old. Some weren't able to get what they needed, and they bought material from other people whom they respected and people who were able to access good materials.
And there's, in addition to that, if you look in the book, and I noticed this when we were gathering the pictures of the baskets, even the masterpiece baskets, there's very, very intricate designs where if you were to rotate that around, you see that it is quite symmetrical, but sometimes the geometry did not work out, and there are asymmetries in the images that you see occasion. So yes, sometimes mistakes are made, but the basket is so far advanced that either they have to throw away a year's work or they finish the basket and they accept that there may be an asymmetry that is noticeable, but does not really lower the quality of the basket. It's just that the geometry is a little bit different from what you might have envisioned in the beginning.
You know, all baskets have areas where the design pattern meets, and it's off a little bit because as you're going around, each row is higher than the other one. So it all comes down to how they dealt with these problem areas. You know, as a contractor, I'm a general contractor, and I look at the way people deal with problems. It's great. It tells you everything about the builder. Let's say finishing hardwood floors. You get to one end of the room and you've got a narrow piece on one side and a wide piece on the other side. Well, you know, you have to kind of work your way back and, you know, change each piece of wood, maybe the last 5 pieces, until your eye doesn't catch all that stuff. I know with my tray, I can see she was constantly correcting the gopher snake pattern to make it look symmetric. And, you know, that is what really demonstrates the skill of a weaver.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate it so much. And I know all of us who are listening have appreciated your wisdom and information. And Gene, thank you also for, you know, being you and Wayne for creating this absolutely magnificent book. And I want to remind everybody again, you still have time to get the 20% off pre-publication price. Just go to our website or to our Facebook page, take advantage of it. And again, I want to thank everybody for coming. And if you are interested in basketry, we have one more in this series on January the 6th. And it's at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. And we have Lucy Parker, who is the great granddaughter of Lucy Parker Tellis. And I think we're looking at one of the baskets, right? If you want to hold that up and say something, so you will pop up on the screen once you show Lucy Tellis's basket there.
Well, let me show the basket again. This is the one she won a prize for during 1924 field days. It was bought by Ella Kane. James Schwabacher bought most of her baskets, but not all of them. She made a few of these baskets that were similar. This one's polychrome. And I think the design is very simple, but beautiful, phenomenal. It just sits really nice on the shelf. Looks great.
So Lucy Parker, who is the great granddaughter of Lucy Parker Tellis, will be our next guest. And so please join us, and you'll see the link to register for it. I'd love to have you join us again. Take advantage of our sale price. You know, we're happy to answer any questions at Sunbelt. We can also forward questions to the authors. But again, thank you for joining us for Sunbelt Spotlight, and please come again. And thank you for our guests very much for their presentation.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gene.